Hello and welcome to the third episode of our Getting to Know series of podcasts. Today's guest is the full-time Liverpool FC reporter who brings the inside track on all matters Anfield day in, day out. He travels and follows the Reds home and away wherever they play, including the pre-season games. I am talking about, of course, Mr. James Pearce of the Liverpool Echo. Hi, James. Thank you for joining us on our podcast today. Anyone knows who you are. They know your thoughts on Liverpool Football Club and obviously read your pages on the Liverpool Echo website and across Twitter. What I wanted to do with the podcast today, if I can, is really to get to know you a little bit more and a bit more about James Pearce, the man, if you like. And I guess the only place to start with that would be sort of your childhood. So what was it life like growing up for you and what was your first exposure to football?
I must admit, like most young kids, I was obsessed with football from a very young age. As I'm sure many people know from my accent, I didn't grow up in Liverpool. I grew up in a place called Bath, in the southwest of England. And it was I was born in '77, so by the age of 5 or 6. It was strange because pretty much everyone in my class at school that loved their football was either a Liverpool fan or an Everton fan because obviously they were the two dominant forces of English football in like the mid '80s then, and it was obviously completely different to it is now in terms of I just remember the absolute buzz of being able to watch the occasional game on TV here and there, and I've pretty vivid recollections of watching the '84 European Cup final and Alan Kennedy sticking away the winning penalty in the shootout against Roma, and so it pretty much went from there. And obviously the all Merseyside FA Cup finals were big highlights as well. And so it was I again, like most young kids, I was desperate to become a footballer, and I remember, that was the dream. But it was to be honest, it was pretty clear from a young age that I was never anywhere good enough to do that for a living. So writing about football was the next best thing.
Yeah, it's interesting you'd say about how football used to be. I mean, I was born in '73, so just a few years older than yourself. And I think the thing that stands out for me was I always used to remember the FA Cup day. The entire day, we had the camera crews were there with the coach at the hotel, and then you'd get the bus, the coach ride into Wembley and everything around it, and it was a whole day thing. And now it's just sort of edited clips and thrown together, and it's there you go, and you kind of feel like you've lost that whole traditional build up and importance that used to come with it.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it's funny because it's not even just the Liverpool games that really stick out for me from those big, the cup finals as a kid. I think you're right. They're just cup final day in general, regardless of who was in it, even if it wasn't your team, was just massive. And I remember it being a full day thing, just watching. I think it would have been Coventry Tottenham in the '87 FA Cup final, and and again, the fact that you'd get. They'd have a reporter at both team hotels. You'd be watching the coaches go on the way to the stadium. I think, these days, people just, the younger generation of fans just would find it quite odd that you'd watch 7 hours of build up to a game not involving one of your teams. But it was, the coverage was so different back then. I think about, the big match on a Sunday on ITV that, it felt like it was only, once or twice a month you might catch a live game, and it's just completely different to now, where you can pretty much watch a stream of any game in any league of the world at any time you want.
Yeah, football's pretty much a 24/7 commodity now. I think if you've got the internet, you can pretty much see any games that are going on at any time. Do you miss the old days in a way? I mean, football has made so many advances with TV coverage, different angles, slow-mo replays, etc. And all of that is great. But do you think that some of the magic, mystique, or romance has gone out of the game?
Yeah, I think a little bit. Yeah. I think it's just different these days, isn't it? I think I remember as a kid, like the first Liverpool game I went to was at Highfield Road, and just the part of the sheer excitement and thrill of because it wasn't like it wasn't you would just go into the game. It was the fact you were able to watch the game live, which you could very rarely do back then. And that was Liverpool had just won the title, I think the week before that, and that they actually went 1-0 down against Coventry that day, ended up winning 6-1. I think John Barnes got a hat trick, and it was just very, very different, wasn't it? It was just a completely different era, and it was it was a few months after that actually that I finally managed to persuade my dad to take me to Anfield for the first time. So that would have been like October 1990, and that was like another really special occasion to just I think you never forget that kind of looking at seeing in the flesh the standing cop for the first time, and I remember we had seats in the towards the cop end of the main stand, and it was I was absolutely transfixed by it, and certainly when as a kid you're not even able to see that regularly on TV. When you actually get there for the first time, it just absolutely blows you away.
Does that change at all? It's interesting you say that, because every time I go to Anfield, and I'm in some ways I'm fortunate I get to go to games, but nowhere near as many as I would like. Every time I go to Anfield and I go up the steps each season, it's always the same, and I'm standing looking down at the pitch, and it just takes my breath away. Does that change when it becomes your job?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does change a bit. I think you probably times when you become a bit blasé about it, and I think also when it becomes I think there's lots of positive sides I'd like to think to being a fan as well as a journalist, because I'd like to think that on an array of issues, hopefully you can empathise with the fans and what they think about certain things because you're one yourself. But the other side of it is you do miss just being a fan at times, and like I suppose an example would be just like the Dortmund game last season was like a real strange mix of emotions, because obviously the fan in you is absolutely buzzing at such an amazing comeback, yet there's also a certain amount of dread as a reporter attached to a late fight back like that, when suddenly you're pretty much ripping up everything you've written and starting again, when you've probably got half an hour we had till our deadline after the game. So yeah, it does change things when it's your job, but I think you're right. Yeah, sometimes you can get a bit too cynical about things and too blasé, and yeah, I think when you've got the honour of going to Anfield and that's actually part of your working day, I think there are times when you have to remind yourself how lucky you are.
Man, Anfield is just a magical place. And I mean, at the time of this recording, Spurs are saying goodbye to White Hart Lane. Last season, it was West Ham saying goodbye to their ground. I can't imagine us knocking Anfield down. Do you genuinely think there will be further expansion to Anfield?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I have my doubts, obviously. I think people would have obviously read John W. Henry's comments last year when, I think he was quoted as saying, who knows whether there will be a phase 2, and he kind of referenced the ticket price protests, which obviously led people, myself included, to think, well, it doesn't sound like they're particularly serious about kicking on and doing the Anfield Road. But I know from going down to interview Andy Hughes, Liverpool's chief operations officer, recently, that they very much are serious about it, and he was careful to say that there's at this stage nothing is definite, and that I think I think just the fact that he said they're now kicking on with this feasibility study about the Anfield Road end shows that they want to find a way to make it happen, and I think it should happen. There's no doubt about that. I think it's an important show of ambition to increase Anfield further. We've seen the ground absolutely packed out as a 55,000 or 54,000 arena this season. I think Liverpool should have a stadium that holds in excess of 60,000, and I think now obviously they're probably going to spend the next, I don't know, probably 6-9 months trying to establish exactly which plan they should pursue to make that happen. I mean, obviously I think a lot of people, myself included as well, thought that they only had till September with this planning permission, but it was interesting that, and actually pretty much due to a technicality, they've actually got an extra couple of years because the way it works apparently is that if the 3 years didn't start from when they got the planning application, it was from when the last tweak was made to the planning application for the main stand, and obviously as they were building it, they had to make various changes to the application. So that's given them this extra period, and so yeah, I think it's just a case of finding the right financial model that works. And I asked the question about because of the lack of corporate seating, does that make it less likely to happen because it wouldn't generate the kind of extra income that say the new main stand does, but I was told that no, that's all factored into it, and they think they can find a solution that works on all fronts. And I think you talk about Anfield being iconic, and how the main stand has been a huge success. And I know from personally from being down at West Ham on the recently, it was that I've never been to, I think, to quite such a soulless, lifeless Premier League arena. And I think it does kind of act as a bit of a warning to be careful what you wish for when it comes to potentially move into a brand spanking new ground. And because it almost felt like the kind of the soul had been ripped out of West Ham when you think about how much character Upton Park had and where they are now in pretty much the middle of nowhere in Stratford. And very just how detached the pitch is from the stands. And so I think the fact that Liverpool have been able to keep that history and tradition, yet upgrade Anfield and make it into such a great facility is a massive bonus. And hopefully I think there's good reason to believe that FSG will kick on and get that Anfield Road end finished as well.
Yeah, I think the problem is for layman fans from the outside looking in, we don't get where the problem is. I can't get a ticket for love nor money. I can't go to our final game this season because there are no tickets to be had. And so everyone would just naturally assume build another stand, we'll fill it. I can't imagine a time where Liverpool Football Club do not fill a stadium. It just seems very, very strange for us, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think, and it's not for me to defend the kind of club stance, but the way it was explained to me was that they've effectively only just finished the main stand in the last probably a month. I think the Merseyside derby was pretty much the first time that the ground floor of the main stand, in terms of the inner sanctum with the new dressing rooms and new media facilities, had been used. And I think they said that they very much wanted to ensure that everything was completely finished with that before they moved on to anything else. You've also got huge building project at Anfield this summer with having to meet the accessible stadia guide, where there's a lot of work going on there at the moment to demolish things, but rebuild ramps, shift 1,000 seats. They're having to kind of rebuild the cop in the corners to add in to try and make up for some of that shortfall. There's obviously a huge resource at the moment as well on the training ground and ensuring that scheme goes ahead. So yeah, I guess they would probably say they don't want to spread themselves too thinly at the moment. But I think I think you're right. It should be an absolute no-brainer getting it done. And I think it will happen. It's just a case of how soon they get around to doing it.
Yeah, I think it's certainly, if I think back to the last couple of seasons, every time you went there, something else had changed slightly. There was a new piece here, a new piece there. The stand was slowly growing, and now it's there. It's the actual changes that they've made, from car parking to the facilities to the articulated lorry with a sound stage on it. There's so much more that they've done now, made the whole LFC experience on match day, as if it wasn't brilliant enough as it was now, just has this real good feel to it.
Yeah. I mean, just when you think back to what I saw, around both ends and around where the main stand was before, and it's you contrast it to what Liverpool have got now. It's the absolute difference between light and day.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Just want to switch back, James, for a minute. I know we've kind of hopped over a bit, but you were saying about your first game and going to Anfield, and you said you had to convince your dad. Who was the driving factor behind sort of football and Liverpool Football Club in particular? Was there any sort of one in the family that really kind of pushed it, or was it?
Do you know what? It's funny, Rick. I wouldn't say there was anyone in the family that was like that. The people obviously talk about their dad, kind of getting them into it and all the rest of it. It was almost with Liverpool. It was almost the other way around. Actually, it was pretty much me getting him into it and just pestering him and bullying him into taking me to games. She included quite a few, the kind of southern away grounds initially, and then, like I said, the first trip to Anfield when we drove up in his old white van in October 1990. In terms of like the only kind of real other family link was which probably partly influenced the fact it was Liverpool, was my aunt. My aunt had a lot of family that were from Liverpool. And she actually gave me a Liverpool scarf for I think it would have been my 5th birthday. I think to be honest, even by then, it was, I was, that into my football, and Liverpool was my team. But yeah, that first trip to Anfield, was just something that it was an unforgettable day, because I remember. Just everything about it. It was in Liverpool, were like 2-0 up within about 20 minutes. Steve Nicol and Rush with the goals, and just we waited around for probably an hour and a half after the game, getting autographs and photos in the days where the players would park in what was then the main stand car park, and there was, I just remember there was no real security or stewards or anything. They were wandering around the car park, and when they came out of the entrance, and you could ask them for pictures and all the rest of it. And it was, I think the other thing that sticks out from that game is I remember my dad buying me a scarf, and I remember saying to him on the way home that, bloody hell, this scarf will be out of date soon, because it had Liverpool 18 times champions of England on it. And it's hard to believe that nearly 27 years on from that journey back down the M6, that scarf, which I've still got in the cupboard upstairs, is still sadly not out of date.
So, how do you go from being a Liverpool supporting youngster from out of town to then starting to create a journalistic career, and then ultimately becoming the Liverpool Football Club journalist for the Liverpool Echo? How does that journey work out?
It's a good question. How did it work out? Well, I mean, to be honest, from I don't know, the age of 12 or 13, I started doing work experience on my local paper that was then a daily paper called the Bath Chronicle. So it was, and pretty much I from then on I thought this is what I want to do. This is definitely it. And in terms of university, it was never really a case of does Liverpool University do the course that I want to do. It was I just need to make sure I get to Liverpool University and just find a course that will do the job. So I ended up doing a history degree at Liverpool University, and from 1996 to 1999, worked for the student newspaper then. And yeah, it's a case of just getting experience. I'd write occasionally Liverpool articles for that student newspaper, and then kind of again, like when I went back in school holidays into university holidays back down to Bath, I'd again go and do a stint on the local paper there, and it would half the time you'd just be making cups of tea for people, and just a case of getting your face and your name known, and volunteering to, if they were ever short of anyone to go and do some non-league match anywhere, you'd say, you'd volunteer, and and go and do it, in the hope that the next time a job came up that they'd think of you. And so yeah, after university in '99, I moved back home. Ended up traveling, backpacking around the world for 5 months, and then would have been about April 2000. Got an email from the sports editor of the Bath paper saying, we've got a job, but the bad news is if you want it, you're gonna have to come back next month, because it's there's a 4-month training period, like an intensive journalism training course in Hastings that we want you to go on. So basically, I didn't. I couldn't turn down that chance. So I ended my backpacking stint a bit early. Came back home. Went to Hastings. Spent the summer of 2000 in Hastings, doing like a 4-month course, which was basically, a lot of it was doing shorthand and the legal side of journalism, and then worked on. I passed all those exams, and then worked on the local paper in Bath for 5 years. So it was a really good grounding, because obviously it was a million miles away from Premier League football and dealing with millionaire sportsmen. But it was, I did a real cross section from like Olympic athletes down there to Bath Rugby is obviously a top rugby union club, and Bath City was predominantly my area, where it was again an absolute world away from covering Premier League football, where I was quite often covering games in front of 100, 200 people on a wet Tuesday night in Solihull or Chippenham or somewhere exotic like that. And then but you know what? That was between like 2000, 2005, and then I always wanted to. The dream was always, I want to imagine being able to write about Liverpool. That would be, if that chance ever came up. And and then I spotted there was a job going on the Echo, not covering Liverpool. It was a general sports reporter's job, and so I applied for that. I think it probably would have been in the January 2005, and I got an interview. I think it was the February. I remember, because it was actually on the same night that Liverpool played Blackburn. So I thought, oh, brilliant! I can actually combine the interview with getting a ticket and going to the game. And it was a horrific 0-0 from what I can remember on a cold midweek night. And then I was kind of waited, on the tenterhooks, waiting to hear back. And it was probably about 2 or 3 months actually. I'd pretty much given up hope, and then eventually I got a call from the sports editor saying that there'd been a recruitment freeze on, but it had now been lifted, and they wanted to offer me the job. So I didn't have to think too long about it, to be honest. And then that was moving to Liverpool in June 2005. So as it was just after Istanbul. The only bad thing about the timing was that one of my biggest regrets is that I actually ended up turning down a ticket for Istanbul. Because it was a day's notice. It was with my mate Peter, who I lived with at university, and we used to go to all the games together. And in 2001, we went to the UEFA Cup final together, and various other big cup. We went to like Barcelona away and Roma away, and so he rang me the day before and said, "I've got you a spare." But I remember pricing it up, and obviously with the flights and at such short notice, I was looking at about £2,500 for a day trip, and I'd just convinced my wife to basically give her job up in Bristol, move to Liverpool with no job. I was taking about a $4,000 a year pay cut to move from Bath to Liverpool. We didn't have anywhere to live at that point, so it was one of those ones where you just thought, I just can't do it. And obviously when you watch it, when it gets to half time in Istanbul, you're thinking, thank God I didn't spend all that money. And then obviously with how that night panned out, I'd have happily paid double to be able to say I was there. But so that was one of those things. But started the Echo in the back end of June 2005, and like I said, it was, to be honest, it was a very kind of bottom of the rung job as a general sports reporter stroke sub editor, mainly sub-editing, to be honest, and a bit of page designing, which I'd done in Bath. And it was, to be honest, in the early days, when at the Echo, it was, I used to just try and volunteer for jobs that no one else wanted to do. Like when, if there was an athlete that needed interviewing, or a tennis player, or the Mersey Tigers basketball, or anything like that, just to try and get an opportunity to actually get out of the office and do some writing. And then over time, the opportunity came up to do a little bit of, so at the time, obviously, it was very different to now, where these days we'd send 2, if not 3 reporters to every Liverpool game. Back then it was Chris Bascombe was a Liverpool reporter, and he would pretty much do games on his own. But it was, sometimes they'd send a second person just to do the manager press conference. So over time, I kind of got trusted with, occasionally they'd let me go and do the manager quotes, and just kind of worked my way up from there. And I think in terms of the Echo, when I probably got the chance to do a bit more about Liverpool, it was when Tony Barrett was the Liverpool reporter, and it was, obviously, as everyone will know, it was the time of Hicks and Gillette, and when things were unravelling and all the civil war was raging at Anfield and all the rest of it, and
the dark days, as we call it.
And as I think, as Tony's probably spoken about quite a few times, it was one of those periods where you almost needed 2 Liverpool reporters, one to cover the football and one to cover the politics, because there was such a ridiculous amount going on. And I think he'd basically said that to the sports editor that this is just too much for one person to be doing. We need another pair of hands to pretty much to help out and ease some of the load. And so that was when I'd kind of pretty shifted across and was kind of relieved of my sub-editing duties and just became a kind of one of the football reporters. And again, even then, being the Liverpool reporter was still a pipe dream, really. Like, it was, I did the job for 3 months after Tony left to go to the Times. That would have been 2009, and I actually did the pre-season tour of Singapore and Thailand that summer. And again, like, it was, because I ended up doing it for 2 or 3 months. Of course, you kind of think to yourself, "Oh, hang on a minute, maybe I've got half a chance." But I didn't really have sufficient experience then to get that job, and it wasn't a huge surprise that Dominic King, obviously now in the Daily Mail, he got the job to take over from Tony. And then, but it was by then I was doing a bit of Liverpool, bit of Everton, bit of Tranmere, bit of whatever needed doing, and then Dominic moved on to the Daily Mail, and again, like, it wasn't plain sailing even then, because I think there was a guy on our news desk called Luke Traynor, who was a local guy, and was a news reporter, and they actually gave the job to him initially, but that didn't work out, and within about 6 weeks they'd offered it to me, and I bit their hand off. So that was February 2011, and obviously I've been the Liverpool reporter since.
So, do you know what, it's interesting, just thinking about what you're saying about the dark times and Hicks and Gillette. How different do you think that would have been had social media as it is now had been around in full force then?
Yeah, I think very different. Yeah. I think it's just these days. I think you're right. I think it's just much easier to kind of to mobilize a campaign, and I think things can snowball and attract. I think with the way social media is now, it's probably easier to establish support and really get something like that going. I think I think you could even apply the same principle to the pursuit of justice and truth over Hillsborough, because it's hard to believe that it's such a horrendous something like that. You think now, when you'd have every single fans' testimonies all over social media from when it happened, and I think same kind of principles with the Hicks and Gillette stuff, where I think it's when you think about it did take quite a while and build up over quite a period. I think, if social media was around then like it is now, I think I think it probably would have come to a head a lot quicker.
Yeah, you're right what you say about Hillsborough. I mean, we would have had lots of video footage, and with mobile phones and everything else, we'd have known a lot more at the time, I think, and it would have been a much more instant reaction. Do you think that FSG get a tough rap because of the Hicks and Gillett saga? I mean, do you think that made Liverpool fans maybe sceptical straight off the bat?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think it probably was a feeling that, do you know what, we were probably too trusting of these guys initially, in terms of with Hicks and Gillett. So, we're not going to make the same mistake again. We've had almost like we've had the wool pulled over our eyes once. It's not going to happen again. And also the fact that the fans were so important in getting rid of Hicks and Gillett and the pressure that they put on. I think I think there's a sense that that kind of rammed home to people, the clout that they do carry. I think it's right to be skeptical and question football club owners. And I think obviously I think sometimes that leads to probably FSG getting probably too much stick at times over certain things, but then there's other things that have gone on where criticism is bound. It's just a result of owning the football club and making decisions that not everyone's going to be happy with.
Yeah, and certainly I think Liverpool fans, as a rule, are a lot more vocal and a lot more questioning than a lot of fans, and I don't think that's wrong either. I think it's important that we do. I mean, I was talking to Paul Tompkins earlier this month on our previous podcast, and if anybody hasn't heard that podcast yet, I'd strongly recommend that they jump back into the archives and have a look. But very much the conversations that he had with John W. Henry and the general vibe he was getting from them was that they weren't just in this for the money, and it wasn't just a case of building up the club and then selling it on for a profit. Do you get the feeling as well that this is a long-term project for FSG?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think, it's been, what is it? We're getting on for 7 years already. And, obviously, last year there was a lot of talk of, speculation about a possible Chinese buyout and all the rest of it. But, the FSG were absolutely adamant at the time that it was absolute garbage. They weren't looking to sell up. They've always been open to the fact that they would be prepared to sell a minority stake in the club if they thought the price was right and there were benefits to be had and it would open up new markets to them and all the rest of it. But I've got when you think they've obviously just in the last probably 7-8 months put in place quite a big reshuffle in terms of obviously Michael Edwards being made sporting director and Billy Hogan to MD and Peter Moore's coming in as the new CEO. And you look at the infrastructure changes with obviously the completion of the main stand, the feasibility studies for the Anfield Road, the new training grounds. It's these are all building blocks they're putting in place for the future, and I don't think there's absolutely no hint at the moment that they're seriously considering selling up. They've always insisted they're in for the long haul, and that certainly looks still to be the case. I think I'm sure obviously there will be a time where they do sell up, but I think it's I think you only have to look at it in sheer business sense at the moment, and the value of their asset is going up and up, and the best way for that asset to continue to go up is for the team to be successful on the pitch, because it has so many other knock-ons, positive knock-on effects. And they obviously believe that they've got the right man in charge with Klopp to bring that success, which largely has eluded them during their reign so far. So I think sometimes I know obviously there was quite a big uproar when some of those John W. Henry emails came out where he was talking about Liverpool being a steal for what they got it for and all the rest of it. But it was it's of course they're businessmen. They weren't attracted to Liverpool by, the great tales of Kenny Dalglish or Barnes or Beardsley or whatever. It was a fantastic business opportunity, and they have turned the business around. What they haven't done is given Liverpool success on the field. But if they were purely interested just on making a quick buck, then I think they would have walked away by now, because they could have. I think with the valuations of the club that are banded around, probably worth 3 times what they paid for it. But I think all the signs at the moment is that they'll be around for some time to come.
I can't help but agree with you about those emails. I got why people would look at them and go, "This is outrageous," but then I looked at it and went, "But if I was a business, that's kind of what I'd be saying anyway." And it kind of makes sense. And that really brings me nicely on to my next point, which was, I think unfairly, you often get the label, certainly on Twitter, of being an LFC stroke FSG apologist. And you always seem to be the one voice that comes out every time everyone gets excited about the transfer. We always wait for James Pearce to come up 20 minutes later, rubbish it. How... chance to put your side on this, because that clearly isn't the case. How does it work? So a rumor gets banded around on Twitter. Where do you go from there?
In terms of transfers?
Yeah, in terms of anything, there's so many different things, but transfers, absolutely, or even just things that FSG are doing, or new consortiums coming in. You obviously see it on Twitter. Do you then take that and then go, right, I'm going to look into this, or do you just look at it and go, oh, it's Indicalia, whatever? How do you go forward with that?
Yeah, I think it depends what the rumor is and where it's coming from. I think with some rumors, they're so ridiculous that if you're kind of, with some of them, you just know they're not true. If I don't know, if it's a particular player or something that and that name's come up before, and you've spoken to someone about that player before, and full well that he's not on their list or on their radar, it can be quite easy to dismiss. Other times, you obviously have to go away and speak to people, and but it can be a whole wide range of people. It's obviously you have contacts at the club, you have contacts at other clubs, you have agents that you speak to. I think don't particularly very rarely would I write a transfer story based on something an agent tells me, just because I think from experience you kind of know that agents only tell you what they want to tell you, and quite a lot of the erroneous transfer stories that we see in other parts of the media emanate from agents who are desperate for their clients to get column inches. So but yeah, there's certain trusted agents that you go to and speak to. So yeah, a whole wide range of people really. So I think it's a bit of a misconception from some people think that that you can just, there's almost like a journalist club call line that you can ring at the club who will give you a running commentary on transfer deals and all the rest of it. That's just not the case. It comes down to contacts and people you trust, and it can be a bit. That's probably the least enjoyable side of the job, to be honest. Trying to chase up rumors, because I think you spoke earlier on about social media, and I think for the same reason, social media where it is now, it's probably never been easier for a ridiculous rumor to get repeated to the point where it's almost established as fact. I've seen it myself with Liverpool transfer rumors where it gets people talk about it to the extent where it goes from someone somewhere claiming that Liverpool are in for a player to, what squad number is he going to have? How many years is he signing for? How will he, where do you think he'll fit in? Can you see him playing just off Firmino or whatever? And you're just like, where the hell's all this come from? And, and I think the other issue, there's so many websites now who will just carry anything to generate hits. And I think that's where, I think I take pride in the fact that at the Echo we don't go down that road, and that we only print transfer stories that we know are true, because I think that kind of integrity and honesty is absolutely crucial. Of course, we have every day you have the transfer rumor mill, which is usually the most read thing on the site, but it's I think it's very important to me that people know that if the Echo's saying something that it's true, and that's why it's not necessarily obviously you want to be first with stuff, but you also want to make sure that it's absolutely spot on.
Yeah, I think there's two things we always look for as Liverpool fans. I think the first thing is for you to start talking about it, and the second thing is to see what now is affectionately known as the Melwood lean. And once we see both of those going on, we're quite happy. I think a really good example of social media and stories, big thing over the weekend, was Virgil van Dijk liked a tweet from Gini Wijnaldum, where he put huge 3 points, and they were like, that's it. He's definitely signing for us. That's what's going to happen. And I know you've talked about it, but if you actually scroll down, he also liked the fact that there was a good 3 points for Southampton. So maybe he is off there. He also liked some bits in Swansea as well. So maybe he's going to go to Swansea. Also liked a Ronald Koeman comment about Goodison. But you can pick the bits that you like.
Yeah.
To kind of fit your argument, I guess is the point. But it must be very frustrating as a reporter for you to be. It's almost like everyone has this impression you have a red mobile phone, and whenever there's a rumor, the phone will go and you'll answer it and go, yeah, what have I got to quash now? All right, we're not signing him. Fine, and away you go. And it's just the way that I guess Liverpool fans, especially on Twitter, can get very intense, I think is probably the word. And it can be a source of frustration. I just wanted to kind of touch on one other thing. And obviously, at the time of recording, we've got one more game to go. One more game to get Champions League, which I think will be huge for the club. Bearing that in mind, how big do you see the 2017-18 season being for Liverpool? And do you think that potentially makes this the biggest transfer window in recent history for LFC?
Yeah, I certainly do. I think, obviously we all hope that by the time this goes out, Liverpool are a Champions League club once again. And, I think, that does make this summer absolutely huge, because, there's been a lot of talk, and, Klopp himself has been quoted as, talking about how, Liverpool are ready to compete at the top end of the market, and, and how they're they're in for top quality signings this summer, and and even admitting that Champions League football is crucial if we're going to get that caliber of player.
Yeah, that was in his recent press conference, wasn't it? Pre the West Ham game, he said that the players we are talking to, and I thought that was really interesting. The players we are talking to are interested in Champions League. That puts a totally different spin on what he's been saying up until now.
Yeah, and it was also very different to what you were saying about this time last year, when I remember being in on interviews with him when he was talking about, if I speak to a player who says he wants Champions League, I'll put the phone down on him, I think was one of his quotes. And, he said, because, I think his phrase was, I don't want people who are going to want to jump on the train. I want them to push it and all the rest of it. And, and I think the noise this time around is very different. I think he knows that, Van Dijk and Keita, players of that caliber, there's absolutely zero chance you're getting them if you're not in the Champions League. And, it's still Liverpool have got a mission to get those done. But, I think that's what makes this summer so big, because, if they are in the Champions League, we talk about the pulling power of Klopp as well. Players want to play for him. I think, that was pretty clear from last summer when, I remember speaking on the pre-season tour with the new guys then, with Mane and Wijnaldum and Matip, and they all pretty much said the same thing about when I met Klopp, that was it. I wanted to play for him, and so I think when you throw that into the mix, you've got Klopp, you've got Champions League football, you've got Liverpool's history and tradition. I think you've got the playing style which, okay, yeah, it's wobbled a bit in the second half of the season, but I think with the brand of football that Liverpool will play and did play in the first half of this season, players will want to be part of that. So then it comes down to finance, and that's why all eyes will be on FSG this summer. Are they going to back the manager in the way that fans want to see him backed? And all the noise up to this point, certainly from Klopp, and in terms of FSG. I've spoken to people who say that there's an admittance on their part that Liverpool do need to spend a decent amount of cash this summer to strengthen the squad, because this season clearly the squad didn't have sufficient depth, I think all eyes are going to be on Liverpool, and it's obviously people will debate last summer, and obviously people point at the net spend and they're not spending in January, and all of that means that there should be a big kitty available this summer. Led to believe that's certainly the case. I think when you swell that with certainly the sale of Sacco and Markovic, and obviously we're waiting to see what happens with Sturridge and various other fringe players, the likes of Kevin Stewart and Moreno and Andre Wisdom. It's you can see Liverpool having some real financial clout. So, and I think also that the thing with last summer is that Liverpool did actually buy very well. The issue wasn't where they spent the money; it was that they didn't sign enough players. So I think that gives you hope. I think it does feel like a huge summer, because getting Liverpool back in the Champions League is one thing, but they've got to ensure they kick on, because it was only 3 years ago that Liverpool were in a similar position after finishing second under Rodgers, and then obviously lost Suarez and squandered an awful lot of that money with some poor buys that summer. So you just hope that mistakes have been learnt from, and that this summer will be very different.
It's quite interesting you say about mistakes being learnt from. It's easy to forget this is Klopp's first full season. Do you think that he will have learnt from January and potentially not purchasing? Because I genuinely believe that this was his decision. They weren't there, and he just went, "I'm just not going to do anything. I'm fine as I am," and not realising with Mane leaving. Do you think that was a mistake he learns from?
Yeah, I think so, and I think he's almost admitted it a few times that do you know what, we probably got January wrong. I don't think he realised just how much of a miss Mane would be, and then obviously the other injuries just compounded the folly of not buying in January. I think I agree with you that it was his call. I know obviously you talk about the stick I get for defending FSG, which, to be honest, I actually, some people don't believe it, but I do literally just I give my opinion as I see it. I do I just find it bizarre that people think that Klopp would be some kind of lapdog to FSG, and that privately he's seething about a lack of backing, and then just is all sweetness and light in front of the cameras. It's that anyone who knows Klopp knows that's just not him.
Him being a dog to any.
No. He, one of his endearing qualities is the fact that he's very honest, and probably more than any other manager I've ever met. He, what you see is what you get with him. He's the same when the camera's on compared to when the camera's off, and it's if Jurgen Klopp wasn't happy and didn't feel as if he had the backing of the owners, I guarantee you that we would know about it, because if Jurgen Klopp thought that he was having to do the job with his hands tied behind his back, then I don't think he'd be keeping quiet about that, because he's a top class manager that could walk into most top jobs across Europe, and it was Liverpool were lucky really that I think the football romantic in him loved the idea of awaking the kind of sleeping giant in many ways, and so no, I think the backing up to now, I think yes, I think he's actually made some mistakes in terms of didn't buy enough last summer. didn't do anything in January when he felt that he didn't want to he couldn't get his first target, so he was going to wait and wait for the summer. But yeah, I think he's learned, and all the word is that he'll get the financial support he needs to do the business that he wants when the window opens.
If we look at this from the fans' point of view, obviously you say that you don't have a hotline through to FSG, but you're talking very confidently about there being a fund available for Jurgen to spend this summer. So how is it that you know that there is the fund out there? Where do you get that information from?
from other people at the club.
Okay, so
obviously there's so many different tiers of and obviously also from I think what Klopp said himself, he wouldn't be it's pretty obvious from the way he's been talking about competing in the market and how I think it's pretty I think FSG haven't. I think it's pretty clear that being back in the Champions League is probably worth £50 million to Liverpool. So that's obviously going to have a knock-on impact in terms of the money available. And then you throw into the mix those sales, what you'd expect to be invested into the squad as well. What I mean by that is there's not like of course I have if I had no contact with FSG, I wouldn't be doing my job properly. Yeah. But it's the idea that John W. Henry or Tom Werner or Mike Gordon pick up the phone and say, could you just do us a 500-word comment piece on this, or just to let you know this is going on or whatever, that's obviously absolute nonsense. But yeah, of course there's some contact because they're the owners of the club, and it's important to have some kind of relationship with them.
Absolutely. 2 quick questions before I let you go, because I know you are incredibly busy and loads of stuff going on. Daniel Sturridge, stay or go?
Personally, I think the time is probably right to sell him this summer. Just with a heavy heart, but I just think with him being among the highest wage earners at the club, and I think 3 seasons now where his availability has been poor. I just think Liverpool probably need to go in a different direction, and I think it'll be sad to see him go, but I just think sell him. I think he should be able to get certainly minimum of 20, somewhere between 20 and 30 million for him, and reinvest that funds elsewhere.
And should Simon Mignolet carry his bags out and follow him?
Definitely not. No. I'm a fan of Simon Mignolet, and I've been very, very impressed with the way in which he's transformed his Liverpool career this season. From December onwards, like most people probably back in October, November time, I thought he might have played his last Liverpool game with having been dropped and Karius coming in, who was very much Klopp's man. But aside from probably the howler against Hull and probably being caught napping by David Luiz's free kick, I think his form's been excellent, and certainly in the latter part of the season, the last couple of months, I think he's really stepped up a gear, and I think he's shown kind of mental resilience and strength that a lot of people doubted he had. I think his decision making's improved. I think he's commanded his penalty box much better. And all the word is that Klopp is not looking for a goalie this summer, and I think Mignolet has shown he's done enough to mean that's the right call, because I think Mignolet should start next season as Liverpool's number 1.
Well, the good news is, James, that's 2 of us that think exactly the same thing. I think he has paid the price for having a very unsettled defence in front of him throughout the season.
Yeah.
I think when you've got Matip and Lovren, I think it makes a big difference. I suppose my one final question is, if there's one position that we absolutely, definitely, positively have to purchase this window, what position is it?
Oh, do you know what? I would actually say centre forward, just because I know. Obviously, Klopp's priorities seem to be a big dominant centre half, and and a dynamic midfielder. But for me, I think especially with if Sturridge does go, I just think you look at the top clubs and they all have a prolific 20, 25 goal a season man, and Liverpool don't have that. And I don't think I like Origi and I think he's worth persevering with, but I don't think he's ready to really lead the charge and for Liverpool to compete at the top end of the Premier League, right to the bitter end and in the Champions League. Obviously Danny Ings, we all hope he'll come back and make a big impact next season, but I don't think you can expect too much from him after the best part of 2 seasons out. So, yeah, for me, it would be a real, top class striker, someone to really, carry that kind of goal scoring burden, and someone we haven't had really, well, since obviously Suarez went and Sturridge's injury woes started.
Fantastic, James. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Hopefully, maybe we can get you back on again soon, and we'll see how the transfer window went and how Liverpool are doing. But until then, thanks very much for your time.
No problem. Good speaking to you.